Welcome all. Today we'll be looking at how we can modify existing PowerPoint presentations and make use of two features of the TurningPoint software, namely conditional branching and comparative slides. I've already created a small presentation on imaging and acute wrist injuries. And what we'll do today is present some basic material in the form of a clinical scenario. We'll then ask the student what they believe the differential diagnosis may be, then present some additional material in the form of some physical examination findings, and then ask them again what the diagnosis is most likely to be. Now what we'd like to do is we'd like to see whether this extra bit of information has changed the student's way in what they believe to be the correct diagnosis, and so we'll add a comparison slide to make that very evident. The next thing we'll do is we'll ask the student how to proceed with this case, and what we will do here is we will change the order of these slides depending on what responses we receive, and here we'll be inserting some conditional branching rules to enable us to do this. So the clinical scenario that we have is of a 23-year-old male, and he's fallen off his bike about a week ago. He fell onto his outstretched hand and had some immediate pain and discomfort in his wrist. So at this stage what we'd like to do is ask the students what they believe that the working diagnosis would be. So on the left here I highlight the area between this slide and the next, and I insert a slide, and it's the vertical slide. So immediately after slide 4, which is this one here, we will have this question slide pop up, and what we do is we ask the question and that is, what is the most likely diagnosis? From here we give them a range of potential answers to choose from. So an acute scapholunate sprain, could be a Colles fracture, scaphoid fracture, a sprain of the distal radio-ulnar joint, or a strain of the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle. Okay, so here are 5 options that they can choose from. What we need to do now is tell TurningPoint which one of these is the correct answer, and in this case it's answer number 3. So we go here, select from the drop down menu and select correct for answer number 3, and then automatically all other options become incorrect. We then offer the student some physical exam findings, again very basic, and from here, after viewing these physical examination findings, what we want the student to do is to then reassess their initial diagnosis. What that means is that immediately after this slide we need to again re-question or repose the question to the student. Often it's easier just to copy the previous polling slide and insert it where you'd like it to be shown. So in this case it's between slide 6 and slide 7, and we paste that. So now we have 2 points at which we've asked the students the same question. Now we insert our comparative slide. We insert that immediately after the second question. We go to Insert Slide, go down the bottom, select Comparative Links. From here we select the first slide and then the second slide, press OK, and what we should have now is one slide which compares the results of the previous two questioning or polling slides. So here the first slide is blue and the second slide is yellow. Right, so the results of these will show up. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to ask the students, well, after these examination findings, what's your next step in the management? Often what we do is we will insert immediately after this another vertical slide, which these are the simplest of all these polling questions that we can add. And we ask them a very simple question. What is the next step in your management of this patient? Okay. We give them a range of responses. The first one could be ice, rest, and gentle range of motion exercises. Second could be a short course of mobilization treatment. The third could be an immediate X-ray, and the fourth could be reassurance and discharge. So there we have. Here we need to tell TurningPoint which is the correct answer, and obviously the correct answer here is the immediate X-ray, because we are suspecting a scaphoid fracture. And from here we now have two ways in which this presentation will go. The first is if the majority select immediate X-ray, in which they're thinking scaphoid fracture, what will happen is the chiropractor's X-ray findings will come up with some positive feedback that they've correctly diagnosed a scaphoid fracture. If any of the other options show up as a significantly large percentage of people answering those, then we have the worst case scenario, where we have a little vignette saying that there was a follow-up, the patient saw their GP for a second opinion, the GP referred the patient to a hospital, an X-ray was taken, and there was a scaphoid fracture present. So what we need to do is we need to set these conditional branching rules at the management slide that we have here. And what we do here is we go to Tools this time, and we set conditional branching. Okay, we select the slide that this will apply to, and we add the rule. So the condition that we are saying is if the majority, in this case, if the majority select immediate X-ray, press OK, then we will go to slide 10. Okay, there it is, slide 10. We go to slide 10. Let's add another rule, and in this case, if the majority again then select, for instance, ice and rest, then what we will do is we will go to slide 11 here. Okay, so we go to slide 11. And you would do this then for the other two responses, the other two options. Press OK. Now from here, what will happen is that when we go into the slide mode, or the slideshow mode, the presentation will run, it will begin to poll, and what you will have is at this stage, if immediate X-ray is selected, it goes to this slide. But if all other, in this case we've only done the rule for the first one, so if the majority select ice, rest and gentle range of motion exercises, it will skip slide 10 and go straight to slide 11. So that's the way it works. We've set it all up. Now all we need to do is to run the presentation. So if we go back to this slide, run the presentation. It's a bit slow at the moment. Here we have the title page and our clinical scenario. If we then move on to our first of the questioning slides and we give our responses, so we have response there. So we've got a maximum of 4 people here. What we find is that out of the 4 people, 1 person said it was an acute scapholunate sprain, 2 people said it was a Colles fracture, and 1 person said it was a sprain of the distal radio-ulnar joint. So now we give them the physical exam findings and we repoll the audience. And what we should hopefully have is another set of results. So what we see here is, following the information, the majority of people said it was a scaphoid fracture. And there we can see that. 1 person still said it was a sprain of the distal radio-ulnar joint. If we now go to our comparison slide, we can see that overwhelmingly the physical exam findings were enough for the majority of people to say that they could recognize a scaphoid fracture based on the information given. When we ask them what the next step in the management of this patient is, then we have our two possible branches. So let's look at the first one that we created the rule for, which was the ice, rest and gentle range of motion exercise. So let's imagine now that the majority of students selected number 1 as their next step in the management. What we should find is that here are the results, and the next step is we get the follow-up. So using their ice, rest and gentle range of motion, the patient went and saw their GP because the pain steadily got worse, and what happened was that the hospital took some x-rays and there was a scaphoid fracture. Now if we go back now and we repoll, and let's imagine now that the majority of people have seen that it's a scaphoid, or have understood that it's a scaphoid fracture, but now recognize that the next step in the management of this patient is to take an immediate x-ray. Then what we find is that the results should highlight that everybody in the audience said an immediate X-ray was the next step, and that as a result of that management decision, they correctly diagnosed that it was a scaphoid fracture, and it's confirmed in the radiological findings. So this is how we can introduce conditional branching and comparative slides into a PowerPoint presentation that you've already created. So I hope this has helped, and thank you very much for listening.